Welcome to Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson. This is the podcast dedicated to first responder mental health, helping police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and paramedics create better growth environments for themselves and their teams. Let's get started.
GetFree.ai. You heard me talk about it. I'm going to keep on talking about it because I love it. I've had about a year and a half, 18 months practice with it, and I still enjoy it. And it saves me time and it saves me energy. Free.ai takes your note, makes what you're talking with a client, just press record. And it does either transcript, it does a subjective and an objective with a letter if needed for your client and for whoever might need it. So for $99 a month, it saves me so much time that it's worthwhile. And if you do it for a whole year, guess what? You get 10% off. More importantly, this is what you got to remember because you are my audience that listens to Resilience Development in Action. If you do listen to this and you want to use free.ai, put in the code STEVE50 in the promo code area, STEVE50, and you will get $50 off in addition to everything we just talked about. Get freed from writing your notes. Get freed from even writing your transcripts. Use that to your advantage. Free.ai, a great service. Go to getfree.ai and you will get one of the best services that will save you time and money. And I highly encourage you to do so. Well, AK Dozanti, or Dozanti with a Z. How are you? I know we're doing second part here. I know you introduced yourself already, but this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I'd like to shift gears because you talked about something earlier that you were a deputy sheriff. And I've always wondered about a couple of things because I work with a lot of people who say leadership doesn't listen. Leadership doesn't get it. Leadership blankety blank. I always wonder what leadership can do differently, not only to support their staff for XYZ reasons, but also around mental health, because some people fear telling their chief deputy, sheriff, name it, that they have had some of those issues because they're afraid their gun is going to be taken away and stuff like that. So I would love to hear more about what do you think leadership can do differently in order to support their staff, particularly in the mental health part.
I think it has to be on both ends. And hear me out. There's a rift between leadership and line level guys or even middle management. And a lot of times we just assume that they're not going to get it. So we don't even bother. We don't bring it up. I'll be honest, I left full-time law enforcement a little over 10 years ago now. And when I left, it was because I had PTSD, suicidal ideation, severe depression, adrenal fatigue, all of these things. What I told them was that I was leaving to go further my education, which I did, but I did not disclose the real underlying undercurrent of why I was leaving because A, I was leaving and I assumed they wouldn't care. And B, I didn't want them to think that I was weak because that stigma was very strong and it still lingers in the first responder world today. But I think that we have to stop assuming that they're not going to get it. Now, I'm not saying if you've seen examples of, somebody speaking up and then that set of admin discards them, take that as evidence, take that as data and information. But we also have to be willing to speak up if something is going on. Now, leadership, my biggest thing is you need to not just put things into policy, but of course put things into policy. However, make sure that your leadership has good education around mental health issues, around my area of expertise is burnout. So being able to recognize things and signs of burnout, because those are things that we have normalized that we have the ability to mitigate, but if we don't, they will become bigger issues. But actually supporting your people in a real way, actually connecting with them, actually going beyond just the pizza party and the written letter attaboy, and sitting down and having a conversation. If you're middle management, make it a point that if you have 6 guys on your shift, that once every quarter you sit down with each one of them and have a cup of coffee and you listen to them about what's going on in their life. Listen to them about what feedback they might have about the job, right? Like there might be things that they're holding back if they don't feel like they can come to you. And if they feel like they can come to you with work stuff and they feel like they can come to you with home stuff, and it's not necessarily a counseling session, but just like, man, my mom's in the hospital and the wife can't get off of work and I gotta take off to watch the kids or something like that. If they feel comfortable enough to say that to you and you're able to say, why don't you take the shift and go be with your family? That's going to mean so much more to them than just some policy that they have to sign or some extra snacks at the end of their shift or whatever the case is. So what I'm getting at is you really have to just genuinely connect with people and then have policies in place to fall back on so that when things do happen, the policies hold everything up and you can just be a human and connect in that moment.
A few things you said that really struck me is connection. And I think that that's the key to anything that we do as human beings, never mind in the first responder world. There's a sergeant that I work with around here that you say quarterly, sit down and have a cup of coffee. He found it a lot more helpful to sit next to him in the cruiser once every quarter.
Sure.
And especially with men, side to side, they'll talk a whole lot more than face to face. Women, they can do face to face a lot easier. But men in particular, they will talk a whole lot more with a shoulder to shoulder conversation than they will with a face to face conversation. And he does this quarterly with his staff, and I really truly appreciate that because the younger officers, as you know, we have a lot of young officers coming into the field right now, and they really feel appreciated and supported, and that changes a lot. And I know it's middle management to be a sergeant, but at the same time, that's where you're going to start believing in administration, because if your middle management is supportive, you will think that the captain and the lieutenant and the deputy and everything else will be supportive too. I don't know all about the ranks everywhere because everyone has slightly different things, but that is absolutely true. The other part that you mentioned is that speaking up. It's tricky though, because if you speak up,
It is.
you might expose yourself. And some people are not willing to do that. So I'm playing devil's advocate here. So I'm an officer. I want to speak up because I'm not an officer, but we're playing along here. An officer, I see someone struggling, they go speak up, but they're told they're weak. They're told they're not strong enough. They can't handle the job. Give me your gun or whatever. Like just throwing a bunch of ideas out there. How do I speak up as a fellow officer if leadership says that to them?
Oh, if you're outside, you're not the person that's struggling, you're wanting to.
My experience is that people who struggle and speak up are the ones who kind of like the first one to speak up if they don't have someone backing them up or supporting them. Not from an administration, but a colleague or someone who's middle management, as you said, they tend to be shunned or they tend to be told like, well, if you can't handle the job, don't do the job. So how do we speak up without the fear of retribution or what have you?
This is going to sound like sidestepping, but contact your union rep and make sure that there's somebody that you can trust. Now, if that's not the case, find somebody that you can trust in the department. If there's nobody in the department that you can trust, you may not be in the right department.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm just being honest. But if there's somebody that you can trust, if there's a union rep that you can trust, reach out to them. If there's a peer support person around that you feel like you can trust, have a conversation. You don't need to disclose everything. You don't need to say, you can, all it has to be is like, hey, I've been experiencing a lot of stress. Stress is very human. Stress is not a diagnosis. Stress is not going to make anybody take your gun away from you. Okay. So, hey, I've been under a lot of stress, been under a lot of pressure. work and home, I need to, have a game plan. What is your goal in bringing it up? Do you need time off? Do you need to, go see somebody and that's going to require you to have to take appointments during your shift at some point? Figure out kind of like what your end goal is. If you don't know what your end goal is, that's okay too, but have a person, at least one person that you can trust in the department, and actually cultivate that relationship before, if you're not in a place right now where you're struggling, cultivate that relationship before you ever even get to that point, because the number one indicator of how well you're going to bounce back from a critical incident is the support system you have before that incident ever even happens.
Right.
So making sure that you're building connections preemptively so that if something does happen, you have that backing. But then if it comes down to it and you need time off, or you just need some extra assistance in whatever way that looks, then have that conversation with a union rep present just to cover your ass, and or a peer support person, or, have that meeting and see how it goes. And I would go up the chain. I wouldn't go straight to the big guy or anything, but if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Chain of command goes a long way. I agree.
And really just talking to a peer, even if you're not willing to go to your sergeant or lieutenant or whoever, just saying things out loud can be very powerful if you've been holding them in for a long time, because the opposite of depression is expression. And if you're not actively expressing, you're actively suppressing. And so men in particular have a really hard time expressing things that they're dealing with internally or things that they're thinking about internally. And so if you're able to just turn that pressure valve a little bit, you might find that you don't even need to go talk to a sergeant. You might find that just that one little conversation with somebody that you trust is enough to let you take a breath of fresh air. And then they've got your back. And then, that can begin to help, right? It's not going to change everything, but it can certainly help.
I think I got to steal that one from you. The opposite of depression is expression. I'm going to steal that one from you. That's a great one.
By all means.
It's absolutely true, by the way. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I think that what you also said is true. And one of the things that I encourage some of my guys to do is go through peer support, because peer support is exactly that. And if you have, an amazing peer support team, they'll understand what, that you need to talk to someone and anything. And sometimes that could be a colleague, that could be, sometimes peer support has people who are more in the higher level administration world, but that still doesn't mean they can't support you and help you. And I really push people to use peer support, because even though I have a lot of knowledge because of my work and all that, I truly don't know what it is to do your job. And I will never pretend I do. And having a peer support person who knows and may know what you're going through because of their own shit or what have you is so important. I really encourage peer support use.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that there are limitations there. Peer support is trained, but they are also not clinicians most of the time. It's on a rare occasion you get that unicorn. But I think that understanding that they're there and they can be extremely helpful, and then being able to recognize, though, if and when you need that next level of care and need to go talk to a licensed mental health clinician who is trained to be working with first responders and trauma.
Yeah, I have a colleague of mine who is a therapist, happens to be a police officer also. And he said that, culturally competent is getting thrown around way too easily. And so we're trying to find a word. We've come up with culturally aware as a way, because I think that it's also important to find a therapist that is culturally aware or knowledgeable of what happens in that world. It doesn't mean they've been through it. This means they know about it. And while your EAP is an amazing resource, and I really support a use of an employee assistance program, sometimes they don't have that cultural awareness of what they're going through. And when you feel that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a first responder, but this is what I've been told. Oh man, they won't be able to handle it. Let me just fucking like say yes to everything and say I'm safe and just move on.
Basically, yeah. They're gonna find a way to skirt around the system. And sometimes it's not necessarily like they won't be able to handle it, but I'm not going to even waste my time. I'm not going to waste my energy. And they almost hold on to their trauma and their experiences as if you're not privileged enough because you've not lived it. You don't get to hear my deepest, darkest experiences. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but I also know that you know exactly what I'm talking about, because these things that happen are, trauma runs really deep in our system. It's not in our brain, it's in our body. And when we carry it for that long, it's almost like it becomes this sacred thing. And we don't want to share it with just anybody. It's like, I'm not going to cast pearls at swine kind of thing. And I'm not saying the therapists are swine, but I'm saying like, it's,
You guys were called pigs, but anyway.
Right. But we value, we put this high regard on this thing that changed us. And it's not necessarily that we put this high value on it, but it's just so personal that we hold tight to it, and we're not going to let just anybody hear about it and experience it.
Well,
so yeah,
I think it's
completely.
a badge of honor I would come up with. And one of the things that I can't remember where I read this, but I stole this from someone else too, is that first responders struggle with a particular diagnosis that's just for them. And it's called chronic uniqueness. You can't understand where we come from. And I think that that's what you were trying to say. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this chronic uniqueness, and like when people say these things that are unique and you wouldn't understand, I'm like, oh, so you're special just like everyone else.
Right. Well, and because that trauma it's so deeply personal, and it is the trauma that we experience as human beings. Every traumatic experience is unique, but there's this already ingrained us versus them in the culture that we just kind of like take that to another level. And when you start understanding trauma and how it shows up in the brain and the body and the nervous system, you start to realize that it's just human biology. You're just a human. And that can be really hard for some people to accept.
Whoa, wait. First responders are humans? I thought they were like robots of some sort. That's why I watched RoboCop.
It's a little known secret.
Okay. Well, I won't tell anyone. No one listens anyway, so we're good. And I do believe in schisms and scissors, depending on where you come from, and it's similar processes. But one of the things that I tell people is that having more resources than less is important. So having a peer support, having schism is very helpful. One of the other things, too, is that I strongly encourage anyone who listens to this and whoever knows me to do a wellness visit with a specialized, culturally aware first responder therapist, because those wellness visits once a year can be so valuable. That doesn't mean you're going through stuff. Maybe you're going through nothing, and it's just like, hey, how are you doing? Because wellness is not like, to me, it's crazy that, I go always with the example of firefighters. Firefighters have cancer screenings, but they don't send, PCP doctor to do cancer screening. It's someone who specializes in the cancer treatment or cancer like they're looking for it. Well, for your checkup from the neck up, you want someone who's specialized with first responders and do mental health. I think that's not that much different. And what wellness visits, I always feel like anyone can do. And by the way, I encourage leadership to do that. I have a few chiefs that actually come and see me too. But the wellness visit has two-prong effect. And the checkup from the neck up is helpful once a year. And then you can create a relationship with a therapist to say, shit, this person makes sense, or this person was willing to listen to me, or they made, like, I can reach out to them as needed. So if something happens during the course of that year, or you're like, I don't know what to do with this. Let me call them. And it's HIPAA compliant, it's protected, and you can start doing therapy with them. I think that's another great way to create another resource for everyone to do that wellness visit yearly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the best things a department can do, and I don't want to say if they have the resources, I want to say if they're willing to allocate the resources to it, is having a department embedded mental health clinician or somebody that is dedicated to, because you could have somebody that's, maybe works with 3 or 4 small departments or something like that, but somebody who's dedicated to their department, because you get the opportunity then to actually build that relationship and back to the connection, because it takes a while to earn trust in general as human beings, let alone, as first responders. And so having somebody that is going to be well received, and maybe a backup person, because not every person and therapist are going to jive. Like you're just, and that's another thing too, is what I hear a lot is, yeah, well, I went to therapy once and it was shit, and so I'm never going to do that again. And I'm like, well, maybe you just had the wrong person. Like, it happens. I've gone through 4, 5 therapists in my life, and it wasn't for, I'm not shopping, but there were certain ones that served me great for the season that I was in, and then it fizzled out, and there wasn't a whole lot more growth happening. Or there were certain ones that I saw 3 or 4 times and I was like, this is not going to work. And that's okay. But again, we don't want to expose our badge of honor, and not too many people are privileged enough to experience that with us. But I think that having an embedded or dedicated mental health clinician is an incredibly beneficial thing if departments are willing to allocate the resources to it.
So many other things I want to mention about that, but I'm going to go quickly because I really, really, really want to talk about time served in your book. But one of the things I would say is I'm not everyone's cup of tea. While I have the cultural awareness, not everyone likes me. Nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of culturally aware people, and some people don't want to talk to a dude. They want to talk to a woman. Again, I know women who are first responder trained and mental health clinicians. I'll send it to you. But ultimately, there's 2 things therapists in this world have to understand. If you're a first responder competent person, I always go after the 4th session. Hey, is this still working for you? If it's not working for you, that's cool. I'll find you someone who probably would be a better fit. I think it's working, but I want to hear your point of view. There's a lot of respect that you get from being open and like, hey, this may not be working, and that's cool. Or, hey, you know what? I got the shit I needed to get off my back. I'm good. I don't need this. And maybe we can go every quarter. Again, having that conversation openly makes it so much better because, again, most of the time people are like, what, you think I'm done? No, I didn't say that. I just said that I want to make sure, and that chronic uniqueness, as we talked earlier, becomes a little less unique when you're able to trust a person and talk about it. So want to mention that, and being okay with, and the clinician thing. I was the jail diversion program in Framingham when it started. I was one of the first clinicians there, and we were right along. Now it's called co-response model. CITs are similar. They're different, but they're similar. And it's good to have those clinicians, because what I found is when I first started, I wasn't really liked, and that's fine because I was part of the Hug a Thug program, and that's okay. I'm not upset about that. But eventually some guys would be, hey, Steve, you're coming with me today. All right. And then they would talk about their own stressors because, hey, you're a mental health. And just because I was embedded and I had, oh, this guy understands us, I was there, they gave me a lot more from those conversations, and that they probably would ever talk to a therapist. So having that one embedded person is really important. I'll play devil's advocate. I've heard someone say to me, well, because I know them, I don't want them to talk about me in the station. And I go, well, what did they have to win by doing so? But anyway, let's go to your books. I want to hear about your books. I know that you do presentations, and that's called Time Served, but I know you also have 2 books, Beat the Burnout and Responder Reset. Which one do you want to talk about first? Which one is your baby? Which one is your latest endeavor? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I do a lot of different presentations. Time served was a cool, unique one that I did for corrections officers and probation officers, and that was really fun to do. But my first book was Beat the Burnout, and that was published earlier last year. And it is not a memoir. It is, I did a ton of research because I'm a big nerd. And so I have some of my own experiences in there just to kind of weave it in as a conduit for the lessons. But I basically reverse engineer burnout in the book, in the 12 chapters. And I take you from the very basics and the foundations. If you are already crispy, I take into account that you may not have a whole lot of brain capacity for complex thought and critical thinking. So the first third of it is written in very simple terms to get you through to where, you have actionable steps. Every 3 pages, there's a new action that you can take, a new thing that you can implement. And then as it goes, it develops into more nuance and more complexity and more deeper thought. So Beat the Burnout, Prevention and Recovery Solutions for Frontline Burnout. And then later last year, so just a couple months ago, I dropped Responder Reset, 99 real-time tactics for frontline regulation. And that is, I love both books equally. And I'm just finishing up the Audible version of Beat the Burnout. But Responder Reset is so fun and so unique. And I love the way that it's formatted. So it has a really robust table of contents, and it's a read this win style book. So you read the first 10 pages to understand how to use it. And then when you need it, because you're going to keep it in your duty bag, in your locker, in your glove box, on the table at the fire department, it's going to be there when you need it, hopefully. And you're going to pull it up or pull up the table of contents and look at the 99 different options for whatever you're experiencing. So read this when you're wired but tired. Read this when you want to connect to your spouse but don't know how, or you can't. Read this when you just had a critical incident. So then each entry is a 1-page entry, and it gives you what you might be inclined to do, what you're the burnout bait, right? So don't take the bait. It gives you a tactical trade-off, so something else to do instead. And a lot of them are based on EMDR style movements, proprioceptive input, grounding, breathing, physical things to put into action, a little blurb on why this works, and then a little mental note to lock it in. And I've never seen any other book like that. And so it just makes me giddy to talk about it. But those are both of my books. They complement each other really well. So the one is more of like the deep wisdom, Mr. Miyagi foundation. Then the other one is your workhorse. That's your backup when you need it.
Well, I like that you understand the language, because when you mention tactical, people will listen to that. Methods or tricks or mental health support, they don't like that shit. So definitely, I like tactical. I think that's one of those things that people really get. And, having the EMDR idea of bilateral tapping is so important. I know it helps calm people down. And one of the things that I talk about with people is somatic stuff. And I'm sure that there's stuff in the book that you do.
All kinds of it. Lots of different unique combinations of things with, you're not doing self-administered EMDR. That's not what it is, but it's some bilateral stimulation.
That's why I use those words,
breathing.
not EMDR.
Yes. And lots of different tactics and options and modalities. So there's something in there for everybody.
But I think that's, why, and there's a book called Tapping, if you ever want to read that tells you a lot about the tapping. It is not EMDR set, but it talks about that. And there's also other things that really work about stimulation of your body, whether it's tapping your chin, pulling on your ears. There's a lot of little things that you can do that will calm you down and at least lessen the anxiety. So I'm happy that someone has written tactical ways to talk about it, not just therapeutic ways. So thank you for that.
Well, yes. And I am a master practitioner in EFT. So the emotional freedom technique. So I actually have the knowledge in the background. I'm not just throwing random stuff out there. Like there's a lot of certifications and study behind it. And yeah.
Well, I'm going to joke around with you a little bit here. You had me at you're a nerd. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And it really is. I'm a nerd at heart also. But I also talk the way I talk because I think that being nerdy and you don't have to intellectualize everything.
Yes. Yeah. I have to work a little bit extra hard. That's like a double, I don't know. I have to work harder to take all of my mega nerd status and bring it to people in a way that it makes sense for them. And I don't mean that, I'm not saying I'm dumbing things down, but I'm saying to make it consumable, to make it digestible, to make it applicable to how they can use the information. And I've been pretty good at kind of synthesizing things and then putting it in a frame where people are like, wow, you make it make sense. And I'm like, okay, that's the goal. Like if I can do that, then great.
Well, no, but meeting them where they're at is the word I use. And I'm not dumbing it down, but me talking about cognitive distortion versus fucked up thought processes, I think the second one is a lot more palpable for my people than talking about cognitive distortion. It's going to be like, what the fuck? So I always say it's not dumbing it down. It's meeting your crowd where they're at. When I'm doing presentations with mental health therapists, there's a whole different language that I use. And I'll give you my trick also of being able to meet people where they're at. This is my second language. My first language is French, so I have to dumb down everything in my brain in order to speak in English. So it works out perfectly for me.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Make me say a TH word. You'll see. You'll definitely see that I'm a French Canadian.
Okay.
But
That's
don't
funny.
worry. My girlfriend makes fun of me all the time. Anyway, but how about telling us how we can get those books? How can we reach you? And if you're doing if we can get you for presentations and stuff, how do we get all that?
Sure. Well, the books are most easily accessible on Amazon, but everything is linked up on akdozanti.com. That is the hub. If you want to find me on socials, you could just search AK Dozanti. But if you go to the website, all the socials are linked up there. Information on speaking and the books and coaching and all of that stuff is the central hub.
Well, I hope people go do that. I will put it in the show notes and it'll be linked and people can click on it. This has been exceptionally fun. I want to make sure I say that because
I agree.
I think that me and you talk the same language in some ways. And that's what I think is important. Just by curiosity, do you know when the Audible is going to be out?
I've got, I think, 3 chapters left. I was so close to being done, and then the holidays hit and my whole family got sick, and myself included. So hopefully, right now we're in the first week of January, hopefully, definitely by the end of the month.
All right. So this will come out in February. So hopefully people can go get your Audible because, again, sorry, my first responder world. I know you guys sitting there and reading a book isn't your thing, but being able to listen to it on Audible, that's your thing. So go get her book. I'm looking forward to reading it myself. Again, I tell my audience always the truth. I haven't read it. And if I did, I would tell you, but I didn't. But I'm looking forward to reading it. And I will read it. I think Audible, I'll maybe get that too, but I'd rather read it. But I want to thank you for your time. I want to make sure you know also, if you ever want to come back, let me know because I really enjoyed our conversation. I think I have more questions to ask. This was a blank sheet when we started. So now there's all these things that I got to come back to. But AK Dozanti, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
And for those of you still listening, look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.